Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another installment of Flyera Gonna Flyera. We got a good one for you this week. We're going to be going over the weekly games as per normal. We're going to mix it up a little bit this time, kind of be more of a generalization style of going over these. We're going to talk about the recent hot surge that this team has suddenly gone on to. Last week we were down in the dumps. This week, a switch somehow flipped and they look good again. And then we're also going to go over Jamey Drysdale's sudden reemergence since returning from injury. Who's to thank? What do we see as a potential ceiling? And a bunch more. And then we're going to end it up with the week ahead. So sit back, relax, and get ready. Another installment of Flyer Gonna Flyer coming your way next. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Flyer Gonna Flyer. We got a good one for you this week. Joining me this week is one of my two gracious co-hosts. You know him, you love him, Mr. Eric Martino. Eric, how you doing today, buddy?
Not too bad, Alex. Just a regular Sunday, talking a little hockey and getting ready to watch some football afterwards. So
I know we got some good football games on today. How about the Lions getting upset yesterday? Did anyone expect to see that?
but Washington's sneaky good though. Like when they're on Washington, they could be on.
I was talking about this with Nordy the other day, and I said if Washington and Detroit were to get in a shootout, that is one of the few teams that could keep up with them just because of the versatility of Jalen Daniels and all the weapons they have there. Brian Robinson, Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz. There's a lot of weapons in that Washington team. I've now accepted that you can't look past them. But, yeah, that was shocking. And we got two good games today. Baltimore Buffalo is going to be good. But anyway, let's move on to the main topics of today's discussion. We're going to be starting off with the week prior, going over the recap of last week's games. 4-0-1. Where did that come from? When this team suddenly was looking 10 feet underground, we had the pretty much had the casket pretty much put underground. We had the thing ready to be nailed down and throw the dirt on it. And suddenly they were like the Undertaker meme where they push the casket open, sit up, and just do the eye roll back of the head thing. And then suddenly right back in the mix of this. They're only 2 points out of a playoff spot. Mind you, a few teams have games in hand. Ottawa currently has a second wild card, and you got a bunch of other teams mixed in there. Boston, who's now currently on the outside looking in. Montreal, who's right there. The Rangers, who have climbed their way back into this. Pittsburgh trying to be relevant, even though they're being delusional, but that's besides the point. But it's a big mess there right now. And we'll look at this right now and what this team really did this week. So, Eric, let me start with you. What stood out to you in these last 5 games? Because they flipped the switch, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know. I really did not see this week coming at all. Like at all. It was really impressive. I gotta say, look, really, really impressive. Look, the Anaheim game, the first one of the week, it was great. Like the cutter comes into the building and he basically gets booed out of the building and the Flyers dominate, and that's great. That was a great game, and it was like especially coming off the Dallas game where I like to see like the resolve that the team had. They came out and that's it. And they destroyed Anaheim. It's funny because
best game of the year for sure. Best game of the year.
Down. Definitely one of the best this year. But then what's funny because the game after against Florida, I missed the first period. I was out. I forgot. I think I was at a hockey game or something. I don't remember. And so I'm looking on my phone and I'm seeing Florida scores, and I'm seeing these tweets like, oh, Philly doesn't look like they're in it again today. And I'm like, oh man, what the hell? Like, we're back to the Dallas game where it's like no energy again. And then I get home, I start watching, and I'm like, what? Like, who? This is not the team I've been reading. Like, this is not. And I really that. So like one thing from this week, man, even the Columbus game is a lot of resiliency by the Flyers. No quit. And I think I mentioned this also before, and this applies to the Columbus game. I find even though the Flyers are not necessarily a big team, we don't like we're one. I think if I'm not mistaken, we're one of the smaller teams in the league.
Oh yes,
Oh,
definitely.
we play big, and that's one thing I have to give them. It's like even against Columbus, where it got chippy, they never back down. And there was a few games like that I've seen this year where they just don't back down. Like a guy like TK, even a guy like Farabee, these aren't the biggest guys, but they're in the piles. They're getting involved. They're pushing their weight around. Bobby Brink, that's one thing he does this year that's really impressed me is he really goes into the corners this year and he battles his ass off
Well, for
for a
sure.
little guy like was he like 5'9" or something?
We were talking about this on the live stream too, when he absolutely laid someone out on Anaheim. I can't remember who it was, and my jaw just hit the floor. I'm like, Bobby Brink is doing this? This little trip out here, look like 5'9", 180 pounds, soaking wet, laying people out in the middle of the ice. Like that was one of the moments of that game where it's just like, wow, this team just came out ready to go. But yeah, continue, Eric. I'm sorry, I had to add to that too.
No, that's it. And one thing also is like I think the power play has gotten a little better over these last 5 games. They have 5 goals in 5 power play goals in the last 5 games, so that's improved a little bit. So hopefully that can continue, and you know, and that's pretty much what I saw. Like they competed, man. They competed against some good teams. I gave them no chance against the Devils or the Panthers, but man, they proved me wrong this week.
You know what really stood out to me about the Flyers game this week was their defensive structure.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at each of these games, outside of maybe the third period of the Islanders game, and maybe the third period of the Columbus game too, but I put that one more based off of fatigue because they were coming off of a back-to-back 3 and 4 nights. Like, players are going to be tired at that point. You only can do so much. But you look at each of these games. I'm going to read off the shots in each of these games that they played. Anaheim had 22 shots on net. And that was kind of towards the end of the third when the Flyers let their foot off the throttle. It was kind of hot. Would have been closer to the high teens if they really kept their foot on the throttle that entire game. And mind you, that Anaheim game, they completely annihilated them. Top to bottom, just completely own play all 60 minutes. It was their single best game of the year, no questions asked. That, the goal upon goal. That third period felt like a friggin' a charity event with how many goals and golden opportunities that they had. You couldn't ask for much better. Cutter Gauthier went missing like on a freaking milk carton. Mitchkov had a goal. TK had a 4-assist night, who, mind you, right now is suddenly number 10 overall in points in the entire league. To you, TK, you burned that contract in the first half of this season. Mind you, we got 8 years to go, so it hasn't even technically started, but he's showing why he has earned that contract so far, playing like a leader. The assists are coming. He's playing that defensive style. He's been put back on the PK after the Paling hit, which we're going to go over because I was bullshit about that, but we'll go over that in a little bit. And then, that Florida game, they come out, they're a little sluggish at first. Urs let in a really bad one, 5-hole. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. They're not playing bad, but at second goal is a type of goal that could potentially demoralize a team. At least I felt that way. Maybe Tweets felt otherwise. But when you let in a bad goal, it's pretty deflating like that. But the Flyers have played well against Florida each of the last 2 years. They always seem like they play this team good. It's interesting. Like you look back earlier in the year, they took them to a shootout in Florida. They lost, but they played them very well. The game in Philly prior to this, they were a back and forth game. They lost 7-5, but again, they played them very well right to the end. And then the second period, that Florida game, they completely dominated it. And, but not to get too far off my point, their shots allowed per game, which is what I was originally going with this. So Florida, they allowed 23. The Ducks, they allowed 22. Columbus, they allowed 28, but again, I kind of put that in that third period and a lot more fatigue. The Flyers kind of felt like they were out of gas, and they still had a 2-1 lead in the third before a defensive breakdown allowed a tie. Lose that game ultimately in a shootout. And then you look at the next game against the Isles. Again, I bring the third period up. The Isles outplayed them in the third, but Other than the fact that they allowed 2 power play goals, they played a pretty good game after. We're going to go over that Paling hit shortly because I was pissed about that. And then that Saturday game against the Devils, in my opinion, was their best defensive game all year. 13 shots. That's it. That's all New Jersey got. 13 shots. They were blocking shots like crazy. They were cutting off the passing lanes. They were dominating puck battles against the board in their own end. The forecheck was resilient, even if they weren't getting shots towards the net, because they didn't have that many themselves. They only had 19. But they were keeping the puck in the New Jersey end. And when the puck was in the Philadelphia end, they weren't allowing the high-quality bids. They were doing an excellent job winning races to the puck, battling off against the boards, and their defensive structure was excellent. And I continue to praise Brad Shaw and what he has done to a lot of these guys. I'm not going to go quite into what we're going to be talking about next, but their defensive structure this week was just superb. They were not allowing many opportunities for the opposition to score. They really weren't. But then not only that, guys like Konechny, he blew up this week. He had a fantastic week. I think he had like 7 or 8 points over these 5 games. He had that 4-assist game against Anaheim, which was sensational. All primary assists. He had an empty netter yesterday against the Devils. I think he had another assist on an empty netter against the Islanders late in that game. He's just been everywhere. That guy's got such a motor, and he really showed it this week. And we can't forget about our savior rookie, Matvei Michkov. He's starting to find his game now again, too. 4 out of his last 5 games, he's gotten a point. He had a beauty of a snipe on Jake Allen yesterday on that little mini breakaway. You're starting to see it more. He's finding his game again after that little rut he was in, for sure. Eric, do you have anything to add?
Oh, just your TK point. He has 11 points in his last 7 games. So yeah, he's been absolutely on fire. And guys that are supposed to be producing are producing regularly. And look, we're getting contributions from guys that had slow starts, and it's really helping us right now. And look, we're getting better goaltending than we had previously.
Excellent. I was right about to bring that up.
Yeah, he had that little stretch at one point after he came back from the last time he came back from injury, where I guess he was awful. And but he's really solidified himself, and he's found his game again. And look, is he going to be the best goalie in the league? I don't think so. I think he's probably like mid to like lower tier starter tandem goalie at the end. Maybe that's what he'll be, but he's been excellent, so can't really complain.
And it's not just Urson. I got to give credit to Fedotov too. He came in this situation dating back to those Toronto starts where he didn't play for a month. And it's hard to get right back into game action after not playing for a month. You can only simulate it so much in practice. He comes out there and he played respectable in those 2 Toronto games, and he's come in since then. They lost to Columbus in the shootout. That he started that game, but I didn't think he played all that bad. Again, he had a very tired team in front of him too, and he still played respectable. He played well enough to at least get this team a point in the only game that they did lose this week. 9 out of 10 points in a 5-game span over 8 days is extremely impressive. And that's the thing with the name of this episode. Up and down like a toilet seat is Tortorella compared to Morgan Frost. This team, just when you think they're dead, they find a way to rise back up, and now they're suddenly right back in this playoff hunt. Yeah. Do I ultimately think they're going to fall short? Yes. I still think you can't divert from plan. I still think you need to sell off some assets at the deadline, at least 1 or 2 minimum. I think Ristolainen should be your top priority of selling off, as good as he's been. But, don't diverge from plan. They've had an excellent week. They looked great. Their defensive structure was good. As you mentioned, their power play took a step forward. 5 power play goals in 5 games. They had 4 in a 2-game span. They put up 2, I think, against Florida? I want to say
2 against Anaheim, 2 against Florida.
Yeah, you got to give them credit. That's That's not a makeshift team right there. That's the defending Stanley Cup champs you did that against. You showed resilience against them. You went down 2-0, and you came back. You had a phenomenal second period. Things that we haven't said enough on this show is good second periods. And you showed some resilience, for sure.
I find, though, like, I would have to look at exactly the numbers, but I find lately, like the past even month, if not maybe a little bit more, I find those second periods that were plaguing us in the first like half of the season, we've cleaned that up a little bit. Again, I would have to maybe for next episode go over the numbers, but I find like they're not having as bad as second periods. And one more thing I find that's really funny that happened this week is I don't know if you know, but there's this narrative that goes around about the Flyers that they always tend to like teams break their streaks against them, like they're on a winless streak, but then they win against the Flyers, or a guy that hasn't scored in like 30 games and then he scores against the Flyers. You know, I find there's this narrative that goes on, and
I know what this is.
Islanders game. Islanders were 0 for 25 on the power play. 0 for 25. And they score against us
twice.
I just when I saw that, I was like, "Oh my god!"
I think it was like 17 games. I thought I heard on the broadcast.
I don't remember how many games it was exactly, but I know it's 25 for sure. It was 25 attempts against 4 that they didn't score on, and of course they score against us, right? Just adding fuel to that narrative. You know, it's like I just found that hilarious.
Listen, we broke the Sabres 18-game losing streak in 2021. Yep. We broke the Sharks winless streak to start the season back in, what was it, last year, actually?
Last season.
Yeah, last year when they lost 11 to 12 to start the year. Yeah. Same thing happened with the Arizona Coyotes, or the formerly known as Arizona Coyotes. A few years before that, they had a very similar start to the year. They did it to us. We're the kings of that. If you're on a slump, you're on a losing streak, you're on a drought with something, have no fear. The Flyers are here. You'll break it.
The Flyers are the cure. That's what it is.
Before we move on to our next topic, I want to go over one thing. And that's that bullshit-ass hit that happened on Ryan Poehling. That was an absolute travesty on what happened with the NHL officiating this week. The guy on the Islanders who hit him, that was... I don't even know what to say about a hit like that. That not only doesn't even get a major, it wasn't even a minor. That is a plague to the NHL officiating. To Splakov, I don't even know how to pronounce the guy's name. He's a rookie.
Splakov, I think.
So Ryan Poehling coming down the ice on a shorthanded opportunity, racing for the puck, cuts left to right, enters close range slot, which I get. You want to protect that. And then to Splakov, again, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Apologize if I'm butchering this.
Splakov.
Leads with the shoulder and clips Ryan Poehling right across the dome. I got in some social media debates this week with some people trying to argue shoulder to shoulder. I don't care. Because the rule is with head contact, any and all head contact from a shoulder shot or any type of the body is illegal. If you're coming across and you're clipping the guy and the head is the main focal point of contact, as the NHL rulebook states on Rule 48.1, if you're coming across and the head is the main focal point of contact, that is an illegal check to the head. And the Hockey Canada rulebook comes out and states even more in depth. Now, this isn't the NHL rulebook, obviously, but it still explains to the point that if you make a shoulder-to-shoulder hit and you hit someone in the head, or a shoulder-to-chest that leads to head contact, or anything along those lines, that's still considered head-to-head contact and considered illegal. How the hell the NHL officiating missed this bullshit-ass call is absolutely flabbergasting to me. Absolutely asinine. They didn't even call it a minor. That was a major. That was a no doubt major.
Can I chip in here? I think if he hit him with the shoulder anywhere other than the head, like the initial contact, even though it went up to the head, I think in the NHL, that's a legal hit. And I don't understand it either. If any contact to the head,
the main focal point of the hit.
I didn't see it on video. I saw a still, and definitely the shoulder contacted the head. But I think in the NHL, unless you actually hit first to the head, they're not freaking calling it.
So the NHL rulebook states, and this is why he got the 3-game suspension. If you listen, unfortunately, we can't play the audio or the video of how the Department of Player Safety explained it, and they explained it perfectly, in my opinion. While there was shoulder-to-shoulder contact, if you make main point focus contact with the head, which is what happened here, the shoulder-to-shoulder was what was first. I originally didn't think it was, but as I watch it, he did kind of clip his shoulder. But that wasn't the main focal point of the hit. This was the dome. And if you watch it from the back camera, you can barely even see the shoulder-to-shoulder skin. You can only see it from the side camera where you only are seeing like the contact from far away. You can't even really see where Paling's getting hit that much. But if you look at it from behind the net cam, the shoulder absolutely comes across and whacks the head like a swinging door. There's no question about that. And if it's the main focal point of the hit, as Rule 48.1 suggests, which is what it was here, that is an illegal check to the head. And I don't understand how that was missed, because the Department of Player Safety did their job for once. It's a rare thing to say that the dopes and dops were consistent, accurate about something. But the fact that they got it right and the NHL officiating got it wrong is mind-boggling to me. This is this guy's first offense, and he got 3 games. That should tell you all you need to know about how bad that was. I originally clamored for 2, but 3 is fine with me too.
Yeah, and look, my major problem with that hit, well, obviously it was a headshot, but at the same time, like Siplikov, look, he's going in for that hit. The biggest issue was instead, like, dude, bend your knees a little and go in shoulder and hit. He would have been shoulder to shoulder, but instead he rises, he goes off his feet, and he rises into Paling. And he does. Look, he catches him in the shoulder, but then the shoulder extends and catches him right in the chin in the face, and which causes that whiplash and then causes him to fall.
And he's probably concussed too.
And that's a big issue. Is players? I find players these days just don't know how to hit. They don't know how to hit. That could have easily been a crushing legal hit, but instead of bending and going in with your body, the guy goes up and he flies up into Paling. Like, don't leave your feet. Don't leave your feet. It's that simple. Don't leave your feet.
If he bent his knees, that would have been a clean hit. I think you were
just
100%
bend your knees
accurate.
and go in. Just bend and go. Like, because he's not it's not like he's a small guy. Siplikov is a pretty tall guy. So why are you throwing yourself? Just go in and make the hit. It's as simple as that. And and even like I remember that game too. There was a call on Risto. Like there was a bullshit call on Risto for interference. The guy, the player clearly had the puck. Bristol hits him, clean hit. He's trying to get the puck off the guy, and the ref calls interference. And you're like, what the like? So I don't know if it was and actually we got karma for that one, because then we scored shorthanded on that penalty. So yeah, no, I don't know. It was just the refs were just missing a bunch of calls that game.
I'm still watching that shorthanded bit, and I wonder what the hell is going through Noah Dobson's head watching that 2-on-1, because he didn't do a damn thing to defend that TK to halfway pass. Not a damn thing.
No.
And then another BS hit was this is where the officiating fucked up, because either you drop the gloves after a hit like that when you're getting challenged by a guy like Hathaway. You do that and everything's forgotten. Not forgotten, but everything is like settled. You drop the gloves, you fight, you get it out of everyone's system who's trying to defend his teammate, and this doesn't potentially turn into a crapshoot. The officiating's lucky it didn't, because at the end of the first, they were lucky this happened towards the later part of the first period, because then Joe Barabee gets called for an absolute asinine slash that he ended up pulling on the guy. And they suddenly state a 2-minute slashing penalty. But this is where the retaliation factor comes in. That if you end up dropping the gloves and fighting him, this all ends up turning into a meaningless issue. Or not meaningless. Again, meaningless isn't the right word. But it ends up simmering down the issue and not letting it potentially escalate into someone else getting hurt or a potential line brawl and the officiating losing complete control of the game. It's nonsense. Anything else you want to add on that, Eric, before we move on?
Yeah, just one last thing, touching on Anaheim and Cutter Gauthier is, and I put this out on Twitter, and I think the kid literally just needs to shut up and play because, like, look, it's starting to become a pattern. Like he was all cocky and everything before the national championship game, and then they lost. Then there was a first Flyers game. He's like, "Oh, I have this game circled," and then they lost. And he was a no-show also in that one. And then this past game too, like where he's like, "Well, if you knew the real reason, then you wouldn't." Like, shut up, but
Then say it.
Shut up. Yeah, that too. Just say it. If you just say it, then just say it. But yeah, no, I think he really needs to concentrate on hockey and stop talking to the press. That's my last thought.
And that's the thing. Yeah, I heard. I don't know if this is true, and I don't attack anyone's family or anything like this, but I did hear that his family was a little bit difficult to work with as well. So I don't know where that came from. Maybe that came from that. I don't know. But the sheer fact that this kid comes out and says what he says I got the game circled, completely sucks ass, tries blaming the media when you're the one who caused all this bullshit, and then you're not saying anything when you say, oh, if you only knew the truth, then fucking say it. Stop fucking sally-footing around the issue. If there's an issue and you got something to speak about and you feel like the media is overreacting on this, say it. This isn't the media's fault. And I like to blame the media, but it's not their fault. It's yours. Grow a sack, shut the fuck up, or say what you got to say. Stop fucking pussyfoot around him. Well, simple as that.
Yep.
But anyway, let's go a little more in depth about this team's resurgence. So we were talking about, obviously, this week. They had a great week, 4-0-1, 9 out of possible 10 points. They suddenly go from about 5 points out to 2. And, they're only 3 out of the first wild card, too. If you want to reel Columbus into this a little bit, they're within striking distance. And while I'm not quite ready to go this far, New Jersey's on a bit of a free fall right now. If you look at them, they're 2-5-3 in their last 10. So who knows if they fall into this. Again, don't think the Flyers make playoffs, but it's always fun to talk about it more when you have meaningful games in March. But anyway, so this team had a bit of a spark this week. If I had to put the main culprits of who has really turned this team around over the last handful of games, the guys that stand out to me the most are Travis Konechny, Samuel Ersson, for sure, because he's been dynamite, and the entire Forster, Cates, Brink line. Michkov needs an honorable mention. He's been finding his game too. Mm-hmm. And maybe a week from now, we end up putting him in. I put him more on this list too. He's been excellent at the little ice time he's gotten. But Travis Konechny has turned into a rock star. You got a bona fide, borderline, you have an all-star sniffing on the line of superstar talent now. Not anything franchise or game-changing to that level, but he's sniffing that line of superstar level. He is, I think he's got what now? 54 points in 47 games. If you do the math on that, I believe that's a 92-point pace, if I'm correct, 93. Hold on, let me do a quick math on that. But he has been dynamite. 94-point pace, I'm sorry. So he's been dynamite. He is, he's got a motor, as Tortorella has emphasized. He's getting ample minutes. Him, Tippett, and Frost seem like a line that has really found its game. And that's another guy who deserves a little bit of credit. Morgan Frost is finally starting to find his game a little bit. Mr. Toilet Seat himself, who was horrible in the first half of this season, has, ever since that Tippett, Konechny, Frost line has been put together, they've been finding a little something there. They have. And, when Frost has a guy like Konechny who can be both a scoring threat in a passing threat too, or a playmaking threat, it's big. Frost is a type of guy that needs to have the puck in his possession more times than not in real life to play his best style of game. And I feel like when they had him and Michkov there, we didn't really put that into perspective because we thought a guy like Frost could be a good play creator that could really help Michkov. But they both need consistent puck possession to really play their game at their best. Frost playing with Tippett and Konechny who are both more all-around guys. I think Tip is more of a sniper, but has a lot of speed. Frost can be a little more open to do things because you have two really big scoring threats on your opposing wingers compared to just one in Michkov. So I got to give it to Frost. He's been playing a lot better. He's been opening things up. He's putting the puck in the net. He's driving to the net, which is something I don't think he's been doing that well prior to this as well. And then Sammy Ursa, man, he's been dynamite. Another great game. Yes, he only had at least 13 shots. He stopped 12 of them. Another game over 900 save percentage. His last 6 games, he's 5-1 with like a .930 save percentage, something crazy like that. And dynamite. Got to give the kid credit. He has been playing very well. Those are those two, and then like I said, the Forster Cates Brink line has been a well-oiled machine for quite some time now. They were all on the power play together when they got the go-ahead goal against New Jersey, and it just shows their chemistry together. Brink hit a good guy. Buries a good feed from Forster. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It was Cates that fed him that. From Cates, who ended up burying one pretty much 8 feet away from the net. The puck movement is good. Their chemistry is excellent, and they continue to be probably this team's most consistent line.
No, look, you're 100% right, and I think, the Forster Cates Brink line in general, I think it's really been, I don't want to say carrying the team for like the last like month or so, but like they've been really like you needed secondary scoring. You can't just depend on Tippett, and you can't just depend on TK or whatever. Like you need your secondary scoring to score. And look, I crunched some numbers. I go, look, Forster, in Forster's first 16 games of the season, he had 3 points. 3 points in his first 16 games. So since then, basically since November 16th, he has 10 goals, 9 assists for 19 points in 30 games. Solid numbers. Really just solid numbers, especially like you're playing on a quote unquote third line, but like I think at this point they're either the first or second line at this point.
I think they have them as a second line right now.
Yeah. So and then look, then you have Cates. In Cates' first 24 games, okay, he had 1 goal and 4 assists for 5 points in his first 24 games. Now, since December 10th, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points in 19 games. He's bringing it. He's found his score. Like, look, he's always been good defensively. He's struggled a bit last year, I think, but injuries was what I think was the biggest concern for him last year and why he couldn't find his defensive game. But like, look, this season he started well defensively. He was putting up his metrics. He was putting up his play driving metrics and everything. He just wasn't able to score. And I don't know like what's happened lately, but like, look, the guy is on fire. And I put this out like I think it was yesterday or the day, like as a bit of a joke, but like, is Noah Cates our 1C right now? Like, honestly, like, is like I wrote is he our 1C again because remember it was like 2 years ago or something where he pretty much was the 1C at one point. But like, you look at it this way, and like he might that line might be actually the first line right now. But like, clearly it's probably TK with Tippett and Frost, but like and Frost too, like you said, another major reason why he's why we're having success right now. Like, look, since December 19th in the last 15 games, he has 13 points. So just there again, consistency. But that's the issue with Frost. That's always been the issue with Frost. Is like the title of the episode, up and down like a toilet seat. He's hot and then he's cold. He's hot and then he's cold. So like look, again, he went through a stretch between November 7th to December 18th. In 15 games, he had 6 points. Like that's maybe that's maybe 3C level production, if that. So and that's the thing. And again, like even just in general, like the Flyers this year have been so up and down, like in general. Because look, in the month of October, they were 4-6-1. Okay. There was in that month there was a 6-game winless streak. And they had 1 win that was in a shootout. Okay. So, but then November, they're 8-4-2. So they had a great November, But then you go into December, 5-7-1. Another slide. And you're like, and then now we're in January, and so far in January, they're 4-3-2. So now they're technically Hockey 500 right now. They're over Hockey 500, but like if you want to calculate the 3 and the 2 together, they're technically under. But we're only halfway through the month, and it's like what 4 wins in 5 games. So I don't know. We'll see. It's just I don't know. It's weird because this team, like the title of the episode again, like I said, like Morgan Frott, this team is like a toilet seat, up and down, up and down, up and down.
Tortorella said it best.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. I don't know what to say because, like, look, I've said it before, and like I think the best thing, especially this year for the Flyers, is to get a high draft pick. I think it's the best. It's the best thing that could happen to us this year because I think as of next season, then I think we're supposed to take that next step. I think next year is where the step comes. So if we could get a high draft pick this year, that would really help the rebuild go forward. But we'll see. Like, look, it's been a weird year. Even like, look, Detroit at one point was on a heater. They've cooled off. Then like Boston goes on a heater. They cool off. It was the
Ottawa was on a heater.
So I don't know. It's just been a really weird season this year in the East, especially. So we'll see. And like, Sam Ersson, again, in his last 7 games, he has a .932 save percentage. Like Fedotov. Look, Fedotov in his last 3 games, look, he's an .877 in his last 3 games. Not great. But look, the first after like you said, he had a month off. He plays 2 games against Toronto. Like we're not talking about like a scrap, we're talking about Toronto. But then look, Columbus, the game against Columbus, he pulls a .929. And Columbus is not a scrub team this year. Columbus is a very good team. So,
they're playing with a lot of this year, Columbus. It's a very good feel-good story, especially with what they went through. For sure.
Look, a lot of Columbus's young players are starting to step up too, which like look, Marchenko. I think Marchenko's a beast. This guy's gonna be
that kid's over a point per game, isn't he?
I think if he's not a point per game, he's very close.
Yeah, he's been dynamite.
Fantilli
hasn't quite taken the step that they'd hoped for yet, but they've got some stubs on that team. Vorokinov too. He's another one that has come out of nowhere for that team. Yeah, I think he's got I think what 29 points already this year, something like that. He's been pretty damn good. 29 points. He had 34 all of last year. He's got 29 already. He's on about a 50-point pace. That's a step forward. As we brought up before in prior shows, Cole Sillinger has taken a bit of a step. Zach Werenski looks like a Norris candidate this year. He's been absolutely sensational. Right now, if you would have asked me today, I'd say it'd be Hughes, Makar, and him. Like, those are the 3 best defensemen in hockey right now. They've all been dynamite.
So that's it. Like, I think also, like, this recent surge is definitely, like, I think the goaltending is definitely a big factor. Because, look, at one point, like, with Ersson hurt, and then Kolosov that, like, really looked at a certain point, just really looked out of place. Like, he was laying a lot of softies. Not one, but, like, 2-3 soft goals per game, and he really needs to work. I'm still surprised he's still up here. So I don't know.
I didn't understand it. I still don't. I really don't see the point of keeping him up here in general. Like, he's not playing. He's, as we've said in the last handful of shows, he should be down in the AHL. Maybe they have a thing like he still is refusing. It's like, all right, you want to be here? Fine. You can be the 3rd goalie. You're just not going to play. You can sit there and watch. That make you feel better? Like,
again, I find that still stupid because at the same time, it's like you're wasting his development. It's a wasted development year if he's just going to be your 3rd. Because look, at this point, clearly Fedotov has outplayed Kolosov.
Oh, shit, for sure.
Easy. And even before Fedotov was sat for a month, you could have still made an argument that Fedotov should have been the backup over Kolosov. Like, it was close, but like, at that point, like, you're still like, well, Kolosov has more of a future, so we should be developing him more. So, but at this point, like, send him to Lehigh, let him play. Like, there is no point in keeping a 22 or 20. I think he turned 23 now, but like, whatever, like a young goalie like that, just sitting in the press box, just collecting dust. Like, what's the point? There's no point in that. Please, Briere, please send him down. That's it. Let him play. Let him play for the Phantoms. Fuck, who cares?
If he wants to play, you got to play down in Lehigh Valley. And if he's going to put a fit, as we've said in prior shows, listen, You're playing down there, you're not playing at all. We're not waiving you, we're not renting you out to the KHL. Grow a sack. Long story short. But yeah, let's move on to another player who deserves his praise. And that guy's name is Jamey Drysdale. So obviously he had a pretty rocky start to the year, and people really starting to question what you were getting out of this kid. And, and then he had the injury. And since he's come back from said injury, I don't know what it is, but it was like a switch flip. I think Jamey nailed it. He originally stated that not to expect much out of Jamey Drysdale until about maybe early to mid-January because he had that core muscle surgery. Now, Drysdale himself said he felt good. He was 100%. He was good to go. But players always bullshit and don't ever give you the honest truth when it comes to the injuries. They don't want to have an excuse built in. And not only that, if you tell people what your injury you're dealing with right now, opposition might try to take advantage and try to pull some moves on you if they think you actually are, or actually in this case, know you're actually still not 100%. With that being said, Drysdale's come back. He's looked like he's absolutely turned a corner. A lot of that might have to do with the core muscle recovery, but I think a lot of that has to do with the magic man they have working their defense, and that man's name is Bradshaw. He continues to work miracles on this team's blue line. Rasmus Ristolainen is probably the biggest example of this, where he left Buffalo. He had all the raw talent, but he was a complete turnover machine. He had no hockey sense. He was always out of position. He got checked by a board. No player, just checked by a board in Buffalo. That was pretty much the highlight that described his career there. He comes here, and while he dealt with some injuries, he worked his way up. Shaw worked his magic on him. He's turned into a legit stay-at-home, probably true number 3 defenseman. At this point, I'm not eating any salary for him. If you're moving this guy, you're taking the whole fucking contract, take it or leave it, or we'll friggin' wait till next year when the guy becomes a potential even higher candidate out there when you might need to move him because his contract is set to expire after 2025-26. But anyway, besides the point, Jamey Drysdale now has played a lot better in the defensive zone. He's using his skating abilities to his advantage, which is the best thing about his game. He's a prolific skater, absolute magician. That there was one goal he had, I think it was it that game against Anaheim where he hit a pass? I can't remember the exact game. I think it was Anaheim. He's from the top of the blue line to pretty much the top of the left circle in probably about a second. And he just went side to side. His lateral movement was absurd. And then he found an absolute seed to Matvei Michkov, who didn't finish it, but Morgan Frost did and ended up getting the goal out of that. I can't remember which game it was, but
I'm pretty sure it was the Anaheim game.
If it was the Anaheim game, that was absolutely gross. Actually, I don't know if it was because I think Michkov only had a goal in that game. But whatever game it was pretty much the perfect description of the type of player you're looking for in Drysdale, where he had the vision to make the play. He used his skating abilities to the best of his ability. And he looks like someone who is really starting to turn into the player that you wanted him to be, that you saw flashes of in Anaheim before he got traded. So with that being said, Eric, where do you stand on this? What do you see as a ceiling for him? Who do we look at that has been responsible for this kid's reemergence? Is it just the recovery of his surgery? Did Bradshaw work more miracles? Do you see this guy being a future legit number 1 power play quarterback that you can rely on for a decade? What do we see out of Drysdale right now?
Well, look, with Jamey Drysdale, he's like I think Torts had said it at one point. I think last year at the beginning of this season, I can't remember. But look, he's a project. They have to rebuild him. They have to tear him down and rebuild him because look, it's really hard for especially for defensemen to come into the league at such a young age and with so much pressure on you, especially on a young team like when he was with Anaheim. And basically you're looked at to be the guy, at such a young age. And so that's where you start making mistakes. That's where you start cheating, and that's where you start having bad habits. So I really like what the Flyers have done with him so far. Because look, especially when he came the first part of after the trade, you see the raw talent that's there. His skating is incredible. He's able to handle the puck beautifully and everything. It's just I find the biggest issues he had was his decision making. He would make
Agreed.
some really bad decisions, turning pucks over, bad passes, whatever. And like, look, at the beginning of the season, I saw less of it, but I still saw a little bit of it. And so, and that's why when like at one point earlier in the season, when you on Twitter, people were really starting to jump on this guy. But then you have to, but take into account, like you said, the guy's coming off core muscle surgery. One, two, they're still trying to redefine his game. So not, and you see it. I find like the last even 2 months, it's slowly been coming. Slowly, it's been coming, and finally now you're seeing he's playing with more assertive. He's more assertive on the ice. He's making better decisions, and yeah, no, look, that to me is all Brad. Like the only, it's Bradshaw. Basically, that's the only thing I could think of because look, like you said, Ristolainen was god awful when he got here. And look, they turned him into like a really, really good top 4 defensive defenseman. And look, that's it. They're tinkering with Drysdale's game now, making him like learn, look, see, read the play better, do this, do that, or like, like know when to pinch, know when to stay not to pinch, like it's just those little details in his game that he needed to fix that. And now I think like you see it. And look, could he be like a true number one? Time will tell. I think and I've said before, I think his floor is a really good second pair defenseman. That's what I think his floor is. Now, could he be that like a true number one? I think he has the skill to do it, and I'm just waiting to see how much further he can develop, and that's it. And like, look, if you compare him with a really good, if he ends up developing into that in 2 years, and you could pair him with like a really good, like a Risto, but like a left side Risto, let's say, like, or if not Andrew McDonald.
Oh, God, don't give me PTSD on that guy. No, we're not talking about AMAC over here. I still have Vietnam flashbacks in 2014.
No, but like if let's say Hunter McDonald could like turn into that big shutdown defenseman that you could pair with a Jamey Drysdale, then I think you could have a hell of a pair there. And like it'll move Sanheim to your second pair, and eventually, hopefully, like if we're in that championship window, if we make the Flyers good enough to be a competitor every year, that could be great,
And you look at a guy like Drysdale too, and just the situation he was brought in here. A lot of pressure was put in this kid. He was the main cog in the Cutter Gauthier trade. Flyers traded their number 2 prospect at the time, who was looked at as a top 10 prospect throughout the league at the time, obviously. He comes here, and he's got a lot of weight on his shoulders. He goes from Anaheim, where, he was a number 6 overall pick, but it's not a big hockey market. He's in a position with a team that is kind of struggling. He got uprooted from his best friend in Trevor Zegras. Comes over here. He's already cool with Cam York prior, so that's good. He at least knows someone. But he comes here into a big hockey market, into a team battling for a playoff spot, into a position where the microscope's going to be on you a lot more because of the circumstance behind your trade. And you wonder a little bit if he maybe had that in the back of his head, like this team is expecting a lot more from me than I originally thought I was going to have to put through in Anaheim. A bit of a mental game. And, he started well, and then once he tried really acclimating to the system, he started struggling a bit, and you started seeing it, obviously. And obviously, as you mentioned, Torts says that we have to completely refine this kid's game. He has his first true offseason here, his first full year with the team. And, he struggled out the gate. And as you mentioned, people are really starting to question what you had in Drysdale. Is he going to be a long-term foundational piece? Is he going to be that power play quarterback that you have sought to have since you let go of Shane Gostisbehere? Like, you haven't had a legit good quarterback one in the power play since Ghost, and then prior to that, Chemo Timonen. Like, that's when you look at this situation and say to yourself, is he going to be the next guy here? We need him to be the next guy here because of the circumstances behind said trade. And, maybe the injury gave him a little bit of time to take a step back, work on his craft, work on the decision-making part of his game. And Bradshaw probably had a lot to do with it during that little time. Okay, here's what you've been doing wrong during the first chunk of the year. While you're hurt, I want you to work on A, B, and C here. Start doing this. think about plays before they develop. Where's the puck going to go if you're going to be in this type of situation? If you're getting forecheck from the boards, do you make the cross-ice pass, or you try just dumping it in to just avoid the turnover? If you're on the power play, are you going to try to become more of a shooting threat where the opposition is going to have to really start throwing bodies in front of you to open up the passing lanes? Or are they going to try to leave the chance open more for you because they don't think of you as more of a shooting threat? Work on that shot from the point potentially to open things up, not just for yourself, but for your players around you, like Mitchkov and Konechny, who can work the boards a little bit better. Things like that is where we look at Drysdale's game and we wonder what you're going to get out of it originally going into it. But now that he's had opportunities to work on his craft between the offseason and that little injury bug, his decision-making looks like it's a lot better. He's using his skating to his advantage. He's being smarter with the puck. He's not taking unnecessary risks. He's really showing his game. He's been analytically, since he's come back from injury, I think the Flyers' third or fourth best player, analytical-wise. So that's something to definitely have some optimism for. As where I could see him end up, I don't know about a true number one defenseman. Do I think it's possible? Maybe. I think if you can get a high-end number two D-man out of this kid who can be a good first-pairing defenseman, to work in with a lockdown, strong defensive first defenseman that could give him more of an opportunity to take risks the way he does, that could really benefit him. And, you look at Cam York, he's kind of had a little bit of a down year, but he's the type of guy, I know they have had some struggles working together to start their career, for sure. They've tried the York-Drysdale combo, and it hasn't worked. And now that Drysdale's on the second and third pairing with Sealer, who is a guy who's a lot more of a defensive defenseman style, who blocks shots, who, plays physical, who gives Drysdale a little more openings to do stuff like that, it opens things up for him a bit. I wonder if you can ever get Cam York to develop into that a little bit more, who has more of a higher ceiling than, say, a Ristolainen or a Nick Sealer. Maybe that could be a good counterpart defenseman for him in the long term. I don't even know if the number one defenseman's here yet. Is it Oliver Bonk? Probably not. I don't think he's that style of defensive style guy anyway. He's more of another type of offensive specialist. But I think if you could get a really good defensive first defenseman to work with him for the long term with a higher ceiling than a Ristolainen or a Sealer, you could really bring out the best of him. You could have that long-term first-pairing defenseman in him.
I think an issue with what we have on defense, like you were saying, like with York and with Drysdale and with even like Sanheim, I think we have a lot of twos and we don't have that true one. But then again, like, look, I think you could win in today's NHL with like a solid 1 through 6. Like some teams will have that true number one pair, then you have like a good to mediocre second pair, and then whatever third pair. If you can run 6 D-men that are like all legit good, and like you don't have that true number one, but yet you have a guy like Drysdale, you have a guy like York, you have Sanheim, Risto, Andre when he comes up, or even like a Grons or a McDonald's, if they end up developing into becoming like these big shutdown guys, you could win with a defense like that. And I brought this point up before. Look at Florida's defense last year. Look, they won the cup last year with who could you say was their true number one? Who was Florida's true number? Aaron Ekblad. I don't consider Ekblad a true number one.
Yeah.
The only one you could maybe make some kind of
Montour, maybe
not even Forsling. Montour's the only one that you could say, oh, maybe, because he definitely brought it to a different level in the playoffs. Yeah. But even at that, Montour's not a true number one defenseman either.
Yeah,
you could build a defense by committee and just have really good defensemen on every pair, and I think you could win like that.
Yeah, and I agree with that for sure. And the Flyers seem like they have a lot of defensemen in that aspect of things. Hopefully, you can continue to develop. You're going to have to eventually move one of these guys, just what you have coming in with Andre and Grons, and Hunter McDonald, et cetera, Oliver Bonk, McDonald maybe to a lesser extent, but the guys that you have a log jam on defense. I think you're eventually going to have to move one. So we'll see. Hopefully they can get those 6 defensemen long term if they can't find a true number one. But I think a good high-end defensive defenseman would be the best thing that you could pair a guy like Drysdale with potentially.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, do you have anything else to add before we move on to the week ahead?
Just one last thing. It was really, really, since we're on the Drysdale topic, it was really nice to hear the chants, the Jamey's better chants.
Jamey's better. Jamey's better. Fuck you, Cutter.
Oh man, that was really, and I think it was just a really like. I know it was also just a bug Cutter, but it was just really nice to hear the fans chant it. It was,
he had a shit-eating grin on his face when he heard that. They were interviewing him after the period, and when when Ashland brought it up, he couldn't hide it. He was doing such a terrible job. He's like, bro, I love this. This is awesome. I'm trying so hard to fucking hide. I'm trying to be in hockey mode, but the kid was giddy inside. He felt like a 10-year-old kid that just got a new friggin' Xbox for Christmas. Like that was very cool to see. I agree. But with that being said, let's move on to the week ahead and wrap this up. Flyers have only 3 games this week, but all 3 are against Eastern Conference teams. All 3 are going to have a major part in where this team could potentially end up in the standings. They mentioned before the week began, the Flyers were on a span starting with that, what was it, the Columbus game it was? What was the game that they played last Tuesday? Now I'm blanking. Oh, the Florida game. Starting with the Florida game, I think they had 9 or 10 straight games against Eastern Conference opponents. And now they're on a bit of a run where they're playing against teams that are right in the same clump as them. Mm-hmm. So the 3 games that they have this week. Tuesday, they host at home against the Detroit Red Wings. That's their next game. Detroit's cooled off a little bit after being red hot, wrapping out 7 in a row. They just got mollywopped by Tampa yesterday. Then Thursday, they're on the road against the New York Rangers, who we get to hear that goal horn quite so much, and maybe the All of My Rangers series that we just listened to about from Urinating Tree before we started this video today. And then Friday, you wrap things up, heading back to Long Island for a game against the Islanders. So 3 games against 3 teams that are all currently not in a playoff position. So, Eric, I'll start with you. What do you see for this week?
Oh, this is tough because after the week that they had this week, if they play the way they did, like against like the way they played against the Panthers, and even the loss against Columbus, or any of the games that they played this week, I could basically see them going 3-0. Realistically, though, I don't think so. But so let's say I see 2-1. Let's say I think they beat Detroit, they lose to the Rangers, and they beat the Islanders again. Yeah, because look, Detroit, like you said, Detroit has after they got on a little run. I guess I don't know if maybe it was like the new coach bump or something or whatever. But now they come down a little bit to earth, and I'm not a Detroit. I've said this before. I'm not a Detroit believer. Mm-hmm. So I think they can easily beat Detroit at home. On the road against the Rangers are back to they're on a bit of a streak now. So maybe the Rangers stay hot and probably beat us. And then the Islanders, look, yeah, I don't like the Islanders. I really don't. They gotta start stripping that team down. Like, look, they have Brock Nelson and Cal Palmieri that are UFAs, and I feel like they should definitely both be traded, like gain some assets or something for these guys. But I just have a feeling that Lou Lamoriello and his hard head is just gonna be like, no, I'm gonna double down and I'm just gonna keep these guys and lose them for nothing. So, but I think we beat the Islanders. So yeah, 2-1 this week.
That's a fair argument. And that's where I'm going to put them as well at 2-1. This team has been very strange lately. And, I predicted that 6-1-1 run. They're 4-0-1 right now. I'm going to stick with it to make it end up at 6-1-1. I think they beat Detroit. Detroit's struggling a little bit. I think they actually win that game fairly easily. I'm going to put them on a 5-1 win against the Wings. I know Detroit gave them some problems at Little Caesars the last time that they played them. I don't see that happening again. Detroit's goaltending has gone back to earth. Flyers have been putting the puck in the net quite often lately. I think Flyers win that one 5-1. I think they beat the Rangers in overtime 3-2 in a gritty game. That Rangers team has been playing very good lately. And then just because they're playing 3 games in 4 nights, I think the fatigue gets to them and they lose to the Isles in like a 42 game. Only reason why I picked that, the Isles have always been a pain in this team's ass for the last half decade. So ever since that 2020 bubble series, to be honest with you. But I'm going to say they lose that one 4-2, mainly because of the fatigue factor. So 2-1, they'll be at 52 points at this point next week, is my prediction. But yeah, anything else you want to add, Eric, before we wrap things up?
Well, yeah, the one last thing I want to mention is we spoke about it last week, and like now, like with the whole Scott Lawton thing with Elliot Friedman, what he said, and then like on this week's episode, he clarified what he meant, and I'm just happy that that Elliot Friedman was able to clarify what he meant, because I took it the way he clarified. And I said even on last week's pod, like that. I thought what he meant was basically that Briere it's not that he doesn't want to trade Lawton, is that he's setting a price, and that's my price. And like, I don't have to trade him. If you want him, this is what it's going to cost you. So I'm just happy that Friedman clarified it, because all those fans that are with Briere can't close and all that bullshit there, like was giving them all kinds of fuel for their fire, and now like at least that's Briere's job. His job is not to give players away.
Yeah.
Like, you have to, especially when you're a rebuilding team, that's when you have to get the most for your players. That's when you can set your price. If you're a contender, you're overpaying. If you're rebuilding, that's when you get the price you want. And like I said last week, he should not give Lawton away. Yeah. Especially that you're getting a guy that could play up and down your lineup. He's not a big point producer, but he can play anywhere in your lineup. He brings leadership. He brings timely scoring. And like, look, if you don't want to give me a first, then fine. Like, that's fine. But then you're not going to get him. And that's I think the way that Briere should be operating.
The team that seemed like that made the most sense was the Toronto Maple Leafs too. And I looked, and they don't have a first round pick this year. It would probably be a first next year, which I could see them doing, but we'll see. But yeah, my final thoughts on this is I just want to keep seeing the defensive structure, because defensively they look good. Hopefully can keep on continuing, and hopefully we're in a position where this team is giving us meaningful games in March, or picking a damn direction and going back into the tank hole. So I don't want to be picking at pick 11 or 12 again. That's the only thing I worry about. Either get that playoff spot or drop down to like the 6th pick or something like that and give us one or the other. But with that being said, that's going to wrap things up this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Episode 28, up and down like a toilet seat, which is what this team has been all damn year. Catch us on YouTube, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. Check out our other channels. Talking Habs, or our buddy Rick, who runs this behind the scenes, does an awesome job. Thank you for everything you do, Rick. Hibernation, where they talk to Bruins. Always check them out. Also on the Don't Puck With Media channel. And obviously right here, Flyera gonna Flyer. And then last but not least, our Pucking Around podcast channel, well, not channel, YouTube, Pucking Around podcast group that we do release every Tuesday. Just go around the league and shoot the shit. But with that being said, thank you all for tuning in to the great episode. We'll see you next week. But with all that being said, sit back, relax, and have a great week. Let's go Flyers.